In the eastern part of the Tibetan Plateau, there is a place called Kham. It is one of the 3 ancient provinces of Tibet. One woman, Pam Logan, is dedicating her life to helping the people of Kham. Beginning with art conservation, her passion has grown to assisting them through the Kham Aid Foundation.
I first came to Kham in 1990, and I was there on a travel grant in quest of Tibetan warriors. I was a martial artist, and I thought I would find some inspiration there for my martial arts training, which I did, and I wrote a book about it later on. But that's what hooked me on Kham. So I gave up my career as an aerospace scientist and took this on.
I started out as a volunteer for another organization. They were doing art and architecture conservation of Tibetan Buddhist monasteries. They moved out of the U.S., so I needed a U.S. base. I created Kham Aid Foundation to support the art conservation work. From that, we quickly expanded to other kinds of assistance for Tibetans in Kham. Art conservation also grew to include all kinds of cultural heritage. I brought in Johnathan, who's an expert in architecture conservation and Asian art history, to run that program.
These monasteries in really anywhere in the Tibetan diaspora, but I think especially in Sichuan province in the eastern Tibetan Plateau, are just really a treasure trove of everything one can imagine, of artwork, architecture, and really an amazing picture of Tibetan culture. While I was out at Baiya, I saw all these conservators, these wonderful team of wall painting conservators at work, and was just amazed at what they were doing, how they were doing, and the fact that they could repair and conserve wall paintings that were 300 years old. One of the goals that Kham Aid Foundation has in the region is to train 1 or 2 individuals who will go out to become professional conservators and get international experience, but because they themselves are Tibetan and from this region, will then be moved to go back home and really try to do work on their own cultural heritage.
After I started Kham Aid Foundation, I realized that I could do other things like education, which is so important to development and to human fulfillment. So we started, as our first education program, the Books for Schools project, where we're publishing books in the Tibetan language, most of them about science, and giving them to schools free of charge for the kids to read.
Another area of education that Kham Aid Foundation has been working in is English instruction. We've been recruiting volunteers to come and teach English in the schools in Kham. Our volunteers teach people starting at middle school on up to adults who come to an evening class.
A lot of these students are hoping to go on to college, and the English exams are really, really important for college entrance in China. This area has just in the past couple of years been opened up to tourism and international business. And so it's really important that people here can carry on conversations and business in English, whether for tourism and various tourism industries, or for like communications, international communications, and business, investment, all of that stuff.
We got interested in sponsoring individual children, and I put Dana in charge of that project.
We have sponsors now for almost 100 girls, and it's doubled just in the last year. So this is a program that's growing very rapidly, and the number of sponsors is growing very rapidly. My responsibilities are to track the girls that are selected by the local Women's Federation for scholarships, to find sponsors for these girls, and to maintain contact between the sponsors and the girls by providing the sponsors with letters and photos of the girls and following them up with site visits to the schools. There's no way the Kham Aid Foundation could pick girls. We're not here all the time, and so we rely heavily on the local Women's Federation, and they choose those girls based on our criteria, which is the girl must be able to speak Tibetan and read Tibetan, and they must be very good in their studies. They must have a very strong reason to go to school. They must be really motivated to go to school and to stay in school for those 3 years.
I was struck by what a huge difference it makes in the life of a girl, and that girls make a huge difference in the life of a community. I thought that if I could help with making it easier for one girl, that it would influence the lives of her neighbors, her friends, her family, in a way that perhaps supporting a boy would not, because girls are so much creatures who are bearers of the tradition of a community and who influence the lives of so many people around them.
From the point of view of government policy, women are supposed to be the equal of men, but different ethnic groups have their own customs and traditions, so there can still be a difference between the sexes. This doesn't mean that people look down on women. We can just say that women do not have the same status as men. You have to admit that a Tibetan girl works harder than a Tibetan man. For example, among the 11 students sponsored by Kham Aid Foundation in Litang, consider the girl called Da Chushi. Because of poverty and the bad condition of her family, she had no chance to attend school.
I ask you in English, okay? When we started working in the medical area, I started looking around first to see what the situation was and talking to doctors in rural clinics. And it was right away apparent that the things that they're really short of are training, because a typical doctor or nurse only gets 3 or 4 years of training starting at age 17 before they're sent off to work. They also need more equipment and more supplies.
Conditions here, I have to say, are pretty bad. For example, we have a shortage of medical equipment, including disposable needles and syringes, and a shortage of drugs.
In 2001, we did a bike ride in order to raise money for help for clinics to get them the things that they need. For example, refrigerators to store their vaccines in so the vaccines don't go bad. Generators for clinics that didn't have electricity to run their lights or their equipment. Bike ride was the idea of a fellow named David Oliver in Beijing. He recruited 3 others, and we went in August of 2001. We had a fantastically difficult but rewarding and satisfying journey, which was 573 kilometers of riding in 9 days. On the way, we stopped at clinics, and one of the team members, who is a doctor, inspected the clinics and made an assessment of what their needs were. With the money that the ride raised, we were able to meet those needs, and this year in 2002, we bought those things and sent them out to the clinics. The midwife program, I didn't think of this myself. This was a request from the Women's Federation, who said this is the most important kind of training you could give to women in rural areas that are really going to help them and help their community. We started teaching women the skills of home health care, care for pregnant women, childbirth, and especially care of small babies. In the midwife program, we're running classes that last for 5 weeks. 10 women are selected from a given area, and they come into Kanding and they receive training at the Maternity and Child Care Health Center.
A house has 3 or 4 stories. Before, we didn't deliver babies upstairs on a bed. People deliver their babies downstairs where the animals are kept, no matter that it was dirty down there. Now we do deliveries on a bed that is clean and sterile.
Our oldest healthcare program is the wheelchair program, which meets the needs of disabled people in Kham for wheelchairs. We have also brought out physical therapy equipment and other things to help people who are disabled. And we're working very closely with the Federation for Disabled Persons and a couple of American NGOs that supply the wheelchairs to us. I've gone out with 3 wheelchair distribution teams now, and the most satisfying, rewarding thing you can do is to give a wheelchair to somebody who has never been able to get out of a chair before. It's freedom that they've never had before, and it's also freedom for their families that take care of these people.
When the patients would come to the area that we had designated to pick up the wheelchairs, we would screen the patients to see what kind of medical diagnosis that they had, along with the doctor. And then from there, we would determine what type of wheelchair they needed, what size, were we going to have to make any modifications to the wheelchair in order to make it more usable for the person that had come. And we would evaluate them, and then we also, if we felt it was appropriate, would give them some exercises to do. One of the patients that we got to follow up on was Tupten. Tupten was a young man who had fallen off the roof and broken his back, and that resulted in him being partially paralyzed in his arms and his legs. This year when we got back, when we went to visit him, and it was great to just see that, you know, here was a young man who, without a wheelchair, would be completely homebound, and now he has the freedom to go and visit with his neighbors and his brothers and his sisters.
Before I got the wheelchair, I had a small wheel cart. Now I have the wheelchair, and I can go to my sister's home on my own.
Forestry program, it's our smallest program, but it's really attracted a lot of interest, and this year we had a really terrific guy from Holland who came out and observed all the planting and took part in it.
There's been large deforestation going on. A lot of trees were cut down. So now in this area a big reforestation campaign is going on. What Kham Aid Foundation does, they actually involve local people with the tree planting to benefit the local people and to preserve the nature, to conserve nature areas.
The way I work is that I research the situation, I see that there are needs, and then I'm a matchmaker between those needs and resources that donors can provide, and also the human resources that we need, the program leaders. Our newest program in 2002 has been the Better Homes program, and this is because I see one thing that holds back healthcare and education is the government-provided living quarters for the doctors and teachers. It's really grim in some of these small townships. So this year we went out with a team of volunteers and we stayed for a week each at 2 locations and worked to fix up the homes of the doctors and teachers with paint, wiring, replacing windows. Everybody had a really great time. It was very hard work, but really rewarding. It really brought us so close to the community, so that part was fun too. People often ask me how many people are there in Kham Aid Foundation. It's actually difficult to count because we have volunteers that come and go. But the one fellow who's always been there since day one is Wu Bangfu, who runs our field office in Kanding. And he is our liaison to the government, and he is our voice when I'm not around, and he manages a lot of the groundwork that is necessary to keep the programs running.
Kham Aid's work is quite good for the people in Kham. You know, Kham area is quite remote. Only in '98, Kanding Prefecture just opened its door to foreign tourists. More and more people say that the people here are needy people. I think the government, the people, especially the people in the Foreign Affairs Office, appreciate Kham Aid's work. They think that we have done much contribution to the local people and some communities.
There's 2 things that make this all possible. Number 1 is the donors who give us the money to make it happen, and number 2 are the volunteers who go out and do the legwork to keep these programs in motion.
For example, Linda Griffin comes to us from Britain, and she's been really crucial to our medical aid program this year.
It's important to have somebody who can communicate with people in their terms for cultural understanding as well. I love working with Kham Aid. I think it's a great organisation. It's small, but it's very efficient, and they're doing a whole lot of different projects.
In addition to the volunteers, I rely a lot on my board members.
Being based in Beijing, I think I can certainly help with liaison with local officials here. I actually have friends who are Khampas. I'm very intellectually aware of the history of the place. But that doesn't prepare you for how beautiful and how stunning the scenery is and how friendly and hospitable the people are.
I've thought a lot about why is there a mystique about Tibet. And there's a lot of reasons. There's the beautiful mountains and this incredible culture that they have. But I have to say that I think the most important contribution that Tibetans have made to the world is in their Buddhist faith, which has been so inspiring to many people around the world and continues to spread. And although there are many, many poor people in the world, I think this jewel of a faith that they have developed is something that's especially worthy of support, and the whole world needs to just take a look at how valuable this is and make sure that Tibetans can keep on nurturing it.
Desi poru de sa